This car here, this Triumph Spitfire, 1973 Triumph Spitfire, it's been at my place for about 18 months now, and a year and a half ago the plan was, I think that's a real Spitfire actually going over right now. Don't know if you can hear that, V12 Merlin. We have the other option here. Yes, this car has been here about 18 months, and about a year and a half ago the plan was to do what I'm going to do now then. But with everything else going on and everything else happening, just haven't got round to it, and we haven't, it's not been on the urgent list, let's put it that way. And but now I feel like I need to be getting this done. Now this car belongs to a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine I've known for a very lot of years, and he really loves this car, and he doesn't get a chance to drive it very often. So to help him out with that, there's a couple of issues with it, but to help him out with the first one, which is a bit of a running problem, an engine problem, we're going to see if we can sort that out for him. But this car is a Spitfire with a difference. The original Triumph Spitfire was actually designed in 1957, and it was first released in 1962, and there were 5 versions of it. Mark 1, 2, 3 and 4, and then the final one, the Mark 5, produced all the way through to 1982, so it was a pretty long lasting car. It was based on Herald running gear, shortened Herald chassis of the period, and it was actually named after the original Supermarine Spitfire from the war, and literally it was only designed 13 years after the war ended, so perhaps that was just a nod to that iconic aircraft that we all know and love. Unfortunately though, this does not possess a V12 Merlin Rolls-Royce engine. I'm not even sure you'd manage to fit one, to be fair, because it is quite a small car, and I don't fit it very well because I sort of tend to find that my head sticks out the top above the windscreen. So I think Jeremy Clarkson on that one. So it's a snug fit, let's put it that way. Now all Spitfires from 62 through to 82, they all featured a 4-cylinder engine. The first 2 Marks, Mark 1 and Mark 2, were 1100 cc's, then Mark 3 and Mark 4 were uprated to 1300, and finally the last one, the Mark 5, which is commonly known as the 1500, sensibly, basically has a 1500 4-cylinder. But if you know your Spitfires, then you will know just by looking at the 2 tailpipes at the back of this one, this has not got a 4-cylinder engine in it. And straight away, as soon as you lift up the bonnet, what can you see? We can see 6 spark plugs. And this has got a Triumph straight 6 engine in it. Now Triumph, as you probably know, made a coupe version of this car, which was called the GT6, and that had the straight 6 engine. I think it was a 2 litre. I believe, from what I can remember, my friend told me that this car has got an engine that has got a 2.5 straight 6 out of the Triumph saloon car, the 2500 TC twin carb. So I think that's correct, I'm not entirely sure, but suffice to say that this was a conversion quite popular to do, and people are still doing it now. Get a straight 6 Triumph straight 6 engine, drop it into a Spitfire, pretty much most of the GT6 bits fit it, and you've got a basically convertible cabriolet body with a really punchy, torquey straight 6 engine up front, with an absolutely fantastic, a straight 6 engine or a straight 8 engine just have got the sound of their own. I mean, they're just fabulous, and this is no different. This is just a lovely sounding car when it's running. The only other thing that you can tell when you look at this car is that the standard, I don't know if you can see there on the bonnet, the standard bonnet for a standard Spitfire doesn't have the power bulge in the bonnet. This is a GT6 bonnet on the front, and the power bulge basically caters for the space needed for the rocker cover, because the engine sits a bit taller than the standard 4-cylinder. So the number one job on this car is to get it running properly. Now we've had it running not for about a year now. I think it was last summer when we last had it running. And it's really problematic, and the carburettors have been an issue for quite some time. Now it does not get a lot of use, and that possibly might be the reason why it's such a problem, but fundamentally what's happening is when we start the car, it will start up perfectly fine. However, this carburetor on this side floods like mad, like literally pours out.
There's a lot of wax that's actually in the port there. I don't know if you can see that brown stuff there. So there's an issue with this. This one we think is working okay, but once it's warmed up, it won't actually run off choke. In other words, the choke or the cold start, the car won't run with without the cold start pulled out. You know, the choke lever pulled out. With this one flooding and that other issue, the decision has been to basically get the carbs off, get them to a specialist, and get them completely overhauled. And that's what we're going to do. Now, the carburetors are Stromberg Zeniths, and they are very similar to an SU carb. In other words, they have a variable venturi. There's a dash pot on the top with an oil damper in each one, and inside the port there, you can just about see the piston. Now, the piston is the part that basically will move up and down. Just on the end of my screwdriver there, if I can get it to move, I can move that piston up and down with my screwdriver. The one on the right hand side moves a lot easier. If I can move that, you can see, and it drops down, comes up, drops down. Yeah. Now what's happening is how these basically work is that as the airflow increases, as the throttle is operated, the engine draws more air. That creates a vacuum in the carburetors, and the pistons move up and down. And the higher the piston goes, the more fuel is allowed into a tapered needle. That's basically how it works, and they are basically self-adjusting. As the engine demands more fuel, they self-adjust according to the engine's demands. And because of that, they are quite a lot more complicated. There's a lot more moving parts than you have in a fixed venturi, such as on the Webers or the Weber carb that's on my Capri. So I think that my friend had these apart some time ago and basically rebuilt them himself. New gaskets and what have you, but we do have an issue with one of these pistons. This piston this side, it's quite hard to push up, and harder than it should be, if you know what I mean, because there is actually an oil damper inside the dash pot here, which is stopping it from just moving on its own. But it takes a little while to come down, whereas this one on the other side is the complete opposite. So this one is very easy to push up, and then it drops down straight away. So, you know, it needs to be sort of in between the two, really. And I don't really have the expertise to sort of strip these down and you know, take them apart, measure them, check them, you know, with all the bits and pieces that these carburetors need. I don't really have the expertise or indeed the equipment to check that things are working properly. So what we've done is we've taken the decision to spend the money, take them off, send them to a local carburetor rebuilder who specialises in carburetors, obviously, and get them to do it for us. So, purpose of today: get these carburetors off, and we'll get them off to the to be rebuilt. First things first, we've got breather, which comes off the two carbs and up into the rocker cover. And get that out of the way. It's quite a substantial lump of pipe. We've got vacuum advance pipe for the distributor. That's just on one of the that was a bit brittle. That's broken. That was just on one of the that's easily fixed. We've got a choke cable, and we have the throttle cable. Also, while we're here, we do the fuel pipes as well. And then basically we've got to just disconnect the cables and unbolt it, and that's as simple as that, really. Now the accelerator linkage is joined together, so we've just got to be a bit careful we don't bend anything when we take them off. That's the throttle cable. Let's twist it round in its lever just to get that out of there. It's just a little nipple on the end. That's all that done. And then the choke cable is just a screw on a like a clamp screw. The trouble with these is holding the screw and the clamp at the same time. That's come undone pretty easily, actually, compared to the fact this might have been sat here for years, not been off for quite a while. That's pretty good. Right, so that's all there. It looks like the rest of it is just a case of unbolting the flanges there is a this bracket here. I don't know if you can see that. This bracket here, where all the throttle linkage is basically tied to. That is there's a bracket which is actually screwed to the inlet manifold. So we'll loosen that off as well while we're at it. I suppose I could have got a socket to do this. The tools are not behind me; they're outside in the back of the truck. Backwards and forwards, getting blooming tools. So I do it quarter of a turn at a time with a spanner. And of course it's not loose, is it? It's going to be tight all the way, because that's what sod's law is. It really isn't going to come out loose. God. You ever had that dilemma where you just sort of think, if I'd have gone and got the tool, the ratchet, the socket, whatever, I could have saved the time, you know, doing this quarter turn at a time, but the time it takes to go out there and get the tool, come back in, start the job, you've got it off with the spanner. And I can never correlate the two, whether one of them is actually more efficient than the other. If you've got the wrong tool and you have to keep going backwards and forwards to get it, I just find that quite frustrating sometimes. I should have just brought, well, I should have just brought my small toolbox in, I suppose. Anyway, it's coming out now. We can take this bracket right out of the way. It basically holds the two cables and operates the choke and what have you, and the throttles to connect both carburetors together. So this rod here is what that's doing the work. So I can basically take that out of there. If I move that, I can take that out of there. Just drop this rod off at the bottom here, and that can stay. We'll give that a coat of paint before we put it back. Just a bit fiddly. There we go. She's out. Now I know from experience that there's no way I'm going to get a socket on these nuts here that actually hold the carburetors. One on each carburetor at the top and one on each at the bottom in diagonals. That is going to be a spanner job. Well, happily the nuts have come undone fairly easily, in terms of they weren't tight. Well, they were tight, but they weren't over tight to start with to get off with a spanner. It is pretty fiddly, and there's a lot of opportunity to drop nuts and washers into the abyss that is below the engine, but they are generally coming off quite easily. But they are joined together, these two carbs, so the linkage here, I think this is all basically fixed, and you've got to basically pull both carburetors off at the same time. And now I've got my fuel pipe is in the way again. So yeah, let's get that up. There we go. So that's them off there. Let's just bring them up to the camera. So let's get them on the bench and have a quick look, see what we can see. Right, so we've got them on the bench, a bit easier to see, I think. May as well start. These are the intakes, so this is where your air cleaners would go. Float chambers on the bottom. That's fairly self-explanatory. Not much else, nowhere else really for them to go. We've got a link pipe here, which is presumably to do with balancing the vacuum some way, I would imagine. Don't know, I'm not an expert on these, so, you know, give me a break. Fuel intake, two of, one on each one there. They're fairly self-explanatory. I don't know what this mechanism does here, not a clue. If I stripped it down I'd probably work it out, but I'm not going to. We've got the pistons inside, shown you already. This one is a sticky one, and there's a lot of wax coming out of there since I've taken them off and left them laying. That seems to have dribbled out a little bit. The one on the other side looks pretty clean, so I'm okay with that, but generally the condition of them could do with a pretty good clean up. The dash pots on the top, this is where the dampers and the diaphragm sit. There's a diaphragm inside the dash pot on each one to allow for the difference in air pressure and to lift the pistons as necessary with the vacuum. And the dampers, they've got oil pots in these. If you just unscrew the top, there's a little piston in there. It looks like there's oil in that one. Oh, and actually no, that one's pretty empty. It's damp though. This one, this side, just very quickly. Yeah, there's oil in that, so that possibly will explain the reason why that's working slightly stiffer than this one because there's no oil in this to damp it down. However, this one I know does stick, and given the wax in the port there, I'm not surprised. Turn them over, looking at the other side. This is the inlet into the inlet manifold onto the engine, so this is all pretty clean, very clean butterflies. They all look very good. And these are the flexible couplings that we've got between the two. So we've got the actual throttle linkage, the common throttle linkage, which is coming off of this bracket here. That connects onto to here, where you got your choke cable and your throttle cable are connecting onto this part. That then, with a rod, basically connects to the butterflies, and through this series of linkages and these flexible couplings here. I say they're flexible, I mean they're metal, but you can see that they can move around. So it's not a fixed rod all the way across. That basically allows a bit of movement of vibration between the two. And then we've got the butterflies there, which are operating as expected. So yeah, we've got idle screws on each one, but I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to have to find out how to set these up. They do need a bit of setting up to begin with, I believe, but again, I've got to find that out. Looks like they've got, possibly this one is the only one that is doing something in terms of cold start. There's not this mechanism on the other side, so I don't know whether it cold starts on one. Basically excess fuel, as in a choke. But that's it. So we're going to, we've got a couple of spacers here. Those are the spacers that go between the carburetors and the inlet manifold. So I'm going to add all that in, hopefully get all this cleaned, maybe have new spacers. I'm expecting the whole thing to be completely redone. And it's going to cost around £370, including VAT. So that doesn't include carriage, of course, and things like that. But I'm going to actually physically take these to the shop, and also probably collect them as well. So that is pretty much it. Not much else to talk about. I'll get them back. We'll get them fitted. We'll get them set up. Happy days. If you want to keep up with what we're doing with this car, then put a subscription on the channel. We really appreciate it if you could do that. It doesn't cost you nothing at all. You can see everything else that we do in terms of cars and tractors and steam. And we've got a hell of a lot of stuff going on at Wheels of Interest at the minute. If you like the video, put a like on for us. That would be great as well. Interact, give us a comment if you want to. If you know anything about these or GT6 stroke Triumph Spitfire hybrids in general, then let us know. We've got a couple of jobs to do on this car. So if you want to keep up, subscribe to our channel. Keep you informed of what's going on, and help us build. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care, and bye for now.